to ESG Conversations. I'm Michelle Livings. Renewi is a recycling company operating in the Netherlands, Belgium, the UK and several other European countries. Listed on the London Stock Exchange since 1988, formerly known as Shanks, Renewi undertook a secondary listing on Euronext Amsterdam in 2020. As a pure play recycling company, the focus is exclusively on extracting value from waste or used materials, rather than on its disposal through incineration or landfill. They also play a key role in limiting resource scarcity through the creation of secondary materials and, by so doing, contribute to a clean and green world. This approach addresses both social and regulatory trends and offers the most efficient solution to recycling used materials. By opting to recycle, Renewi avoids emissions of more than 3 million tonnes of CO2 and also helps to reduce resource scarcity. Renewi employs over 6,500 people and is recognised as a market leader in Benelux and as a European leader in recycling. Renewi's vision is to be the leading waste-to-product company in the world's most advanced circular economies. And I'm very pleased to say that CEO of Renewi, Otto de Bont, joins me now. Otto, lovely to have you here. Welcome.
Hi, Michelle. Good afternoon.
Hi, lovely to have you here with us. Thank you so much. So let's get into it. First of all, what is the relevance of ESG and sustainability to the Renewi business?
Well, Michelle, it's obviously very relevant because we're an environmental company and we prioritize our vision and values, and ESG standards remain a central factor to our strategy. In fact, sustainability is at the heart of what we do at Renewi. It's one of our core values, and it's also the reason that people join our company. And we see sustainability as becoming an ever-increasing part of our future. Because in a circular economy, where waste and recycling companies will become secondary material suppliers. And we've been working more and more with partners to ensure that we close this circular circle that we're so hard working to make sure that that happens. We're also seen today as an increasing part of the solution of the circular economy, and also in that crucial part in addressing the climate problem. Historically, our industry was more regarded to make sure that we would dispose the waste in a clean and efficient way. But clearly, we have become much more than that today.
Absolutely. So what is Renewi's core ESG strategy then? And what would you say are your main objectives if we think of sort of the three main ESG priorities right now? And how does this fit in within your wider sustainability strategy?
Yeah, well, at Renewi, we have identified 6 sustainable development goals from the 17 that the United Nations has formulated, which we can have impact on. For instance, on climate action, on the responsible consumption and production, and also on sustainable cities and communities. From those 6, we have then identified 3 main themes that connect us at Renewi. First of all, and maybe most important, is that we want to enable the circular economy. Second, in doing so, we want to reduce our own carbon emissions and waste. And thirdly, as we do this, we want to make sure we care for our people, but also people in the societies that we operate in. And these themes are then translated into 6 objectives that we can clearly quantify and also measure as we make progress year over year in our 5-year sustainability targets.
That's great. Can I go back to the first theme that you mentioned, the first priority there, the circular economy? What is the circular economy?
Well, yeah, circular economy is an economic system that tackles global challenges such as climate change, biodiversity, but also waste and pollution. And most linear economy organizations take a natural resource and turn it into a product that is ultimately disposed at the end of its life. The circular economy is about creating a more circular solution where products create a longer lifespan and can be reused over time. And at Renewi, we would like to make sure that the circular economy is not only creating a longer lifetime, but also eliminates waste by finding continued use for the materials that we can take out of that waste and create for reuse, so that they will be reused over and over again in the economy.
Yeah, that really is fantastic. So what role does Renewi play in addressing environmental challenges facing the world today then?
Well, the answer, Michelle, is really outlined in our purpose. We protect the world by giving new life to used materials. We are reducing the amount of waste that goes to landfill or incineration by recycling more of that waste into new products. Why do we do this? Because producing raw materials from secondary materials creates less greenhouse gas emissions than when you would do that from virgin. And that really helps prevent resource scarcity as well as the greenhouse gas emissions. Now, I can quantify this a bit more if you want.
Yes, please.
Because the circular economy, if you look at the impact of it, today it's relatively small because the circular economy is only 8.9% of the total products that are used in the world. Only 8.9% is reused today. So you can imagine if you can increase that, that would have a significant impact. But even today, when you look at the circular economy in 2030, we believe that it can shrink global greenhouse gas emissions by almost 40% and cut virgin resources by almost 30%. Now, our commitment to transition waste for reuse can also slow down climate change. And currently, the national climate pledges are expected to take us about 15% of the way towards returning the temperature to below 2 degrees Celsius. The other 85% we believe can be delivered through a well-functioning circular economy. And lastly, the world is currently only 8.6% circular. And if we could double this to 17% by 2032, and thereby reduce extraction, transport, and production of virgin materials, we could lower CO2 emissions, which would keep us below the 2 degrees global warming in 2100. Renewi's commitment to greenhouse gas emissions is that we are recycling activities to avoid emission of more than 3 million tons of carbon, as secondary materials has a significantly lower carbon footprint than virgin materials. In addition, we reduce resource scarcity and contribute to a clean and green world.
Gosh, that's really impressive. So which companies do you feel then are the drivers for change in this sector? And also, how can these businesses, as well as Renewi, collectively make a positive impact on climate change?
Well, first of all, we have other companies in our sector that are actually actively looking at recycling instead of incinerating waste and making energy of it, or disposing waste. And we see more and more innovative technologies come to market. So our peers, in some ways, are partly going to help us to drive the circular economy. But also, if you look at end users, if you look at large companies like IKEA or Coca-Cola, they are truly driving the circular economy because consumers at the end want products that are made from recyclates and have a better impact on the environment. Now, currently at Renewi, we reach a recycling rate, as we call it, of about 66%, which means from the 14 million tons that we collect, we turn 66% into recyclates. And we have set an ambitious goal in 2025 to increase that to 75%, which means we have to turn another 1.4 million tons of waste, not to landfill or incineration, but to turn it into recyclates. So those are ambitious goals, and we certainly cannot do that together. We need these partners in the chain to make sure that this happens.
Yeah, indeed. So in addition to climate mitigation, can you explain the role of the circular economy in actually preserving natural capital?
Well, yeah, of course. The circular economy delivers protection by reducing dependency on new and virgin materials because you reuse materials that have been used before. And these materials can be also quite rare materials that are often found in conflicted areas in the world. For instance, rare metals that are used in the high-tech industry. We play a key part in safeguarding a sustainable supply of these critical raw materials by extracting them from waste and then bringing them back into the production cycle for reuse. And this is crucial because at the end, this is a step towards a low-carbon society, and through recycling, the European economy can access these resources in a sustainable manner.
Earlier on, you mentioned another theme, greenhouse gases. Could you share how Renewi is currently reducing greenhouse gases through recycling and the production of secondary raw materials, and also what your future ambitions are?
Sure. Well, as I said, we are recycling 66% of our waste today, which is about 9 million tons. And because of that, we avoid about 3 million tons of CO2 emissions. Because again, recyclates, if are used by our customers, are generating less CO2 emissions than virgin materials. And as we increase our target of recycling rates, we will increase our volume by 1.5 million tons. And again, that will have a significant impact on CO2 emissions, where we will increase to about 3.5 million tons. Second, avoiding CO2 is one thing, but in our own production and in our own collection with 2,000 trucks, we also create CO2 today. However, our footprint is a lot smaller than the CO2 emissions we avoid. In fact, it's about a ratio 1 to 6. So we have about 500,000 tons of CO2 emissions to avoid about 3 million tons of CO2. And if you look at initiatives to further reduce that 500,000 tons of CO2 emissions, in collection, we are testing diverse zero-emission vehicles across Netherlands and Belgium to make sure that we have basically no emissions anymore. And we're increasing the volume for those trucks to replace them, mostly for inner cities today, because that's where governments are asking us to come with zero-emission vehicles. We also look at more efficient route planning. We look at working together with our competitors to make sure we become more efficient in collecting waste. And at the end, also in processing, we look at various steps to make sure that our CO2 footprint will reduce. So we're moving towards electric trucks, but also yellow goods like cranes, bulls, and so on. We also generate bio-LNG from our digesters when we take food waste, and we are reusing that into our own factories. And then, of course, looking at solar and wind energy, we are building solar roofs on our plants. We're putting windmills on our plants to make sure that we become more self-sustaining in terms of energy use than we are today. So those are all going to be factors that are going to help us to become more green than we are today even.
Yeah, you're clearly doing an awful lot already. Thinking about the green economy then as a whole, what are you most proud of when thinking of the development Renewi has made towards a more sustainable business and contributing to a green economy?
Well, I think the first thing is that it's great to be an enabler of the circular economy, to be part of the solution, and therefore to be in the front line to tackle a climate emergency. I think that is one of the things that makes me most proud. Of course, that we focus more on secondary material production, working together with big companies like Shell, IKEA, Unilever, to help them to create this circular solution is what makes me proud as well. And I think thirdly, looking at our own steps that I just talked about, putting solar panels on our roofs, making sure that we have zero emission vehicles, all helping to reduce our own CO2 footprint also is a part that makes me proud. So in all factors, I think truly Renewi is helping to drive the circular economy in a very sustainable way.
Yes, absolutely. Thinking broadly, what are the key EU and also national policies that are supporting the transition to a circular economy?
Well, first of all, the UN SDGs are an important part because in SDG number 12, they talk about at a country level, the recycling rates that have to increase. And of course, as I talked about, we are certainly helping that. If you look at the European level, the European Green Deal is a decisive driver for the circular economy because all member states are implementing it in their own way, but at the end with the same goal in mind. If you take the Netherlands, which I still see as one of the most ambitious economies because also they are going above and beyond even what Europe is prescribing today, we have one of the most progressive programs where the government has indicated that at 2050 they want to be full circular, 100% circular economy. And an in-between measure is 2030 where we want to be half circular. And half circular is then translated into using raw materials for us. Half of them should be secondary materials, which of course is a huge opportunity for Renewi to be able to be part of that change. If you look at Belgium, Belgium has implemented the Flarema 8, which is an announcement that basically tells you that any residual waste that currently goes to an incinerator or to landfill has to be recycled first. And that's not the case today. But by forcing this through legislation, it means that we will have to start recycling waste streams that today are not economically viable, simply to meet the new legislation. But because it is legislation, we can pass on cost increases or price increases to the customer base, and at the end, make this part of our business model. And then in the UK also, they're catching up, looking at food waste as well as other waste policies that are coming to life in the UK as well. So across Europe and UK, we see a lot of focus on creating the circular economy.
Yeah, fantastic. I have one last question. If you could ask the legislators for changes to accelerate this circular economy, what would you ask for?
Well, first of all, across Europe, we see a lot of different policies and changes. So becoming a little bit more uniform would be helpful, although I realize that is a bit of a challenge. Second, I think per country, if you look at getting clear, specific, uniform and long-term policies to reach circular goals would be helpful. I gave the example of the Netherlands. The ambition is certainly there, but it has to be translated in more clear goals and in-between guidelines, and in some ways also into legislation, because that will allow us to invest in the longer-term future, making sure that we are ready to take the next step in the circular economy, providing new and innovative technologies, and making sure that we can get some financial returns on those. The example I gave for Belgium, for Florema, is a great one, because we decided, based on that new legislation coming in, to invest 60 million euros in new sorting lines that we will put in place in the next year to make sure we can meet these new obligations. I think second, taxation itself and incentives are important. And probably if you look at all of the measures that we're looking at, it's aimed to make recyclers more competitive against virgin materials, which will also generate a more consistent demand. Today, you still see spot market prices. For instance, plastics has gone up and down in prices based on oil price. But at some point, recycled plastics became more expensive to make than the virgin plastics. So you can imagine that the demand all of a sudden dropped to zero, which is not good if you have long, big capacity built to make sure you can make recycled plastics. So consistent demand at realistic prices is important. And that's where this true product pricing comes in, which would include in the selling price of a product the environmental damage that a product creates. And that would make, for instance, a virgin plastic product a lot more expensive today than what we actually pay for it, and would make it easier to compete with recyclates and at the end also economically viable. Yeah. And if we are able to reach a zero carbon circular economy, we need systemic innovation, we need systemic finance initiatives, and also technological and social innovation revolution to previous industrial revolutions. So this is really a big change that we're looking at, and we need to work together to make this happen.
Yeah. Otto, thank you so much. It's been fascinating talking to you and incredibly informative as well. So Otto de Bont, CEO of Renewi, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Michelle. It was a pleasure.